District 4, which is Alton, Barnstead, Belmont, Guilford, Gilmington, LaCounty, Durham, Stratford, Tilton. I'm a part-time professor out at UNH, and I was a professor out at the Air Force Academy. My wife is a school teacher in high school, and she was actively involved in the school choice movement when we were out in Colorado at the Air Force Academy, helping start a private scholarship foundation, and they also had a lottery just like this because their resources were limited. So I'm a strong proponent of school choice, whether it's protecting homeschooling or charter schools or vouchers or tax credit for private schools as well.
My name is Eileen Liponis. I'm the Executive Director for the New Hampshire Public Charter School Association. I myself participated in the lottery for my oldest in a charter school here in the Seacoast. I do not have an education background. My background is early stage venture capital, identifying innovations in industry and throwing the finance and strategy behind them. I found that I really needed this option for my oldest child, and I've thrown myself into this because I believe we all need options for our children.
Thank you. My name is Rick Trombly. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for NEA New Hampshire, which is the largest teachers union in the state. I served 8 years in the New Hampshire legislature, in the New Hampshire House, and 2 years in the New Hampshire Senate. And I have been working for NEA New Hampshire for the past 10 years.
Hi, I'm Beth McClure, and I started a charter school nearby in Pembroke called Strong Foundations Charter School. I started it because I am a teacher of reading, and I knew how I wanted to see reading taught. So that's how our school began. It's become much more than that. But our first group of first graders is now in 4th grade, and although three of the 12 who started with us in 1st grade were reading on target in November of our first year, 100% of them are reading on target now.
I'm Emma Rous. I'm a lifelong educator, taught at all levels from preschool through college at the public schools. My children went to public schools. I went to public schools. I don't believe that any child's education should be subject to a lottery. I think every child deserves an excellent education.
And Emma was
right.
served as the chair of the House Education Committee in the state legislature very recently.
Thank you.
So as you can see, we have a wealth of knowledge in terms of our panelists, and I'd like to just sort of get the conversation going. I was struck, obviously in this film we're really hearing a lot from or examples, if you will, from large urban areas within our country. So I think it'd be interesting to have the conversation, think about what does this mean here in New Hampshire. So let me just open it up to members of people in the audience who might have a question for one of our panelists or a comment on the film. Don't be shy. Yes, and I'll try to repeat the question so that people in the back can hear.
Perhaps none of the people are able to speak to the film, but in the vast number of people waiting for the lotteries, I didn't see a single child who is obviously and visibly suffering from a handicapping condition. Now maybe I missed that, or maybe there's something about the schools that they're proposing that leaves such children out. Has anybody got any idea which?
Yes, Eileen.
The charter schools are public schools, and they have the same mirror image almost nationally of children who receive special education. 10 to 11% in both sides of the public school spectrum, with charter schools and with district schools, if I'm addressing the question correctly.
So, the question being, are children with handicap able to use these charter schools? Maybe, Emma, do you want to comment?
I think the only thing that I would add to that is that very often the charter schools don't have the resources to provide special education services, and that the public schools themselves are still responsible for providing those services to New Hampshire students who are in charter schools. We used to, in an effort to avoid double payments to both public and charter schools for the same students, we have eliminated the payments to public schools. So we're now, to regular public schools, I should say. So we're now expecting those schools to provide special education services without providing any monetary reimbursement for that.
I mean, speak to that as well. In our school, we have probably an overrepresentation, slightly, of students with IEPs, but certainly within a normal range, about 25%. And in fact, public charter schools partner with the geographic residence public school to provide special education. So we are mutually responsible. It's my understanding that the District of Residence does receive some funding towards that special education student. Certainly it varies how much that costs to educate such a student. However, we, and I know the other public charter schools, take very seriously our role of educating all children, all students. And in fact, at Strong Foundations, our percentage of students with an IEP is double that of the state reading, of students reading proficient or above.
Slightly off the topic of charter schools, but there are some states that do school vouchers for special ed, and then the kids can then take the voucher, which is just money given to the parent to go to a school that specializes in special education. And the satisfaction rates in those programs are twice as high as the public school systems there.
Another question from the audience? Yes, the gentleman in the back.
What's the total number of children in the United States that are in charter schools versus public schools?
I know the charter school number, not the total number. There's over 4.6 million charter school students.
And I think somebody's asking to clarify, charter schools are public schools. They're publicly funded, publicly executed.
Okay, so charter versus non-charter schools.
Right.
So would that be about 2%? I'm just trying to get a general percentage.
I don't have that number. In New Hampshire, it's less than 1%.
In New Hampshire, less than 1%.
Right. Yeah. But
So,
he's asking the national.
just based on that, what do you, what would the panel believe could happen in the non-charter schools, considering that the vast majority of kids don't go to charter schools? How could they be improved, and what role do charter schools play in that?
So the question is, how can children who are not in public schools benefit from improvement efforts
They're not in charter schools.
that are not in the charter schools from these efforts?
Charter schools are intended to be a living laboratory, and we are charged with sharing our best practices. And so we are collaborating as best we can across the country with district schools to do just that. In Ohio recently, they had a phenomenal sharing of best practices with districts conference, and they've set a very a great example nationally for how we can partner together. And that's what we are charged with doing. We are allowed this innovation in order to set an example and provide that living laboratory of testing and sharing of best practices.
I think that's a very good question. There's a line in the movie that says, what happens when a school fails a child? And I think there's a better question to that. What happens when a community fails a school? Charter schools play an important role in public education. And you might say, wait a minute, is that Rick Trombly talking from NEA, New Hampshire? And it is. Quite frankly, there are some students who do not or cannot learn in a traditional classroom setting. And charter schools provide that opportunity with that type of innovation and the ability to provide more time with smaller classes for that student to thrive. Emma's right, no child should have to rely on a good education through a lottery. Charter schools, while being one component of improving public schools, are not, however, the total answer. I think charter schools do have the same problems that public schools had. You're dealing with children here, and children are children regardless of where you put them. But they are one piece of it. However, public schools need resources, as do charter schools. Public schools need the type of debate that this film brings to a discussion about education. There are issues with the way some things are presented in the film which I think are not presented accurately. For example, in the film you heard that 17% of public school students are proficient. When you use that word, you need to know what's behind it, and the film doesn't explain it. For example, when you're using tests, and you're going to use the word proficient, you need to know that the word proficient means those students who are basically testing at a high B, low A average. If they're advanced, they're at the top of the scale, and they're receiving the A+. The film says only 17% of the students in the country, I think that's the number, testing proficient. Well, that's at the B, low A range. What it doesn't tell you is over 70% of the students are testing at the basic range, which is the C grade, which is not an indication of failing schools. So I think the question is a very good one, in that charter schools definitely have a role in public education, if they're done well. But we can't lose sight of the fact that charter schools suffer from, and are going to suffer from, the same problems that you face in the charter school, because we're dealing with the communities and we're dealing with children themselves.